Dan Illman, Matt Bernier taking a look at race number 9 at Belmont Park on the Belmont Stakes undercard, one of the more historically important races of the racing calendar. It's the Grade 1 Metropolitan Handicap, the Met Mile. $1.2 million is the purse. Of course, it is a one-turn mile at Belmont Park. Play it with your DRF Bets account. There is a 10% exacta winners bonus in effect throughout the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival when you play through your DRF Bets mobile account. Learn more at bets.drf.com. Here's the field for the Met Mile, and boy, the Belmont Stakes is of course the main event. But this race might steal some of the thunder from the Belmont because it is a war with so many talented horses, Matt.
You know, it's one of those instances where it really is a Breeders' Cup caliber field here in June. And you're right, the Belmont Stakes is the headliner. I think from most people's estimation, when you take a look at this field in the Met, top to bottom, you can make a case realistically for, dare I say, all 9 of them. I mean, certainly there's a couple of them that look a little bit like they're in deep water. But boy, realistically, I could sit here and say I wouldn't have a problem picking 7 of the 9.
Morning line favorite is in the Bob Baffert barn. That is the number 2, McKinsey. And McKinsey got the turn back in distance that I think we both agree he needed last time out. And a little bit of a drop in class didn't hurt either in the Grade 2 Ali Sheba. I liked what he did that day because he had to use 2 moves. Mike Smith broke with him, and I just thought Smith was going to put him right on the front, and he did for about the first half mile or so, and then he just let another horse go. And sometimes you don't make 2 moves and win. It didn't faze McKinsey in the slightest. He eased outside the pace setter, blew right on by, and won very comfortably. He's one of the more naturally talented horses in this division. I think a one-turn mile hits him right between the eyes. I think he's going to be a little bit further back this time around, but that's no problem. We saw what he did in the Malibu when he was widest and fastest.
I was going to say, I mean, that's one of those things that you don't have to be worried about with a horse like this, where, you know what, if he comes from a little bit farther back than he was in the Ali Sheba, not to worry, because we've seen him rally from off the pace in the past in one-turn races. I think he ticks all the boxes. He has the ability, he has the talent, he has the connections, and if you believe the pace is going to be there in front of him, he's going to come with his run. I actually like this one-turn configuration for him, maybe even more so than the 2 turns. It's going to be curious to see, regardless of how he runs here, and I know this is what we're talking about. I'm going to be very, very interested to see where they go with him going forward and what the next sort of goals are, because you would have to assume all the big money is going a little bit longer. And I think you and I are in agreement. The longer it goes with McKinsey, I think the less effective he actually is.
But he's still very good going a longer distance of ground. But I'm with you. I kind of like him at these middle distances between 7 and 9 furlongs, 7, 8.5 furlongs. Here's a Baffert formulator fact to tick another box for McKinsey. Past 5 years, older dirt routers, 3rd off the layoff, graded stakes. This is also off of a win, 45% winners, $2.05 return on investment. McKinsey is a very, very logical contender in this race. The number 3, Mitole, has been a win machine for Steve Asmussen. All he has done is win 6 in a row and 7 out of his last 8. He was on the verge of being a superstar sprinter as a 3-year-old, Matt. He got hurt in the middle of the year. He's come back. He's had no rust whatsoever. 3 races in a row, 3 wins, 3 triple-digit Beyer speed figures. Now, in those Oaklawn races, you look at those Timeform U.S. pace figures, you see they're color-coded blue, and you wonder, maybe Mitole had the best part of the race. Last time out at Churchill, I think he went a fair pace. He showed that he could sit off of a horse on the outside, but that race kind of just held up, didn't it? Speed basically ran 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 around the track.
It certainly did, and I think it's one of those instances where you look at it and you say that's something that you need to keep in mind looking at that Churchill Downs and any of the horses that exit it. Now, we've only seen one horse come back to run. That was Bobby's Wicked One. Don't hold his poor effort against him because that was on grass. It was his first time trying a different surface. So we still don't know what the form of that Churchill Downs is going to look like. I think the most important thing from Mitole coming out of that Churchill Downs was the fact that he showed the ability to sit off of a target and still be effective. Now, look, the water, I think gets even deeper now here on Saturday afternoon, but I do think you have to look at him and say, if you're a fan of him, 3-1 seems like a fair number.
He's stretching out to a mile. There were some questions before the Churchill Downs about the 7. There are going to be more questions about the mile. Here's a Steve Asmussen formulator fact to consider. Past 5 years, older horses on dirt going from sprint to route off of a short layoff, 50% winners, a $2.50 return on investment. Let's throw up the Timeform U.S. pace projector. We know Mitole has speed. We know he rated last time out. We see Metropolitan sitting in third in this spot. I'm not sure that's the key. Last time out, he drew outside of Promises Fulfilled. This time, he draws inside of Promises Fulfilled. Doesn't Ricardo Santana just have to go?
I think he's the speed nearest the rail, and I understand that Timeform US has Cold Front out there on the lead. I would be absolutely stunned if Cold Front was the one that was actually cutting out the fractions. I think they're probably going to be sort of swap the 1 and the 3, where the 1 may be the one that tucks into the pocket behind a horse like Metropolitan and Promises Fulfilled going. I think it's just a situation where use your speed to your advantage. If somebody is hell-bent on going to the lead, sure, that's one thing. But I think the last thing you want to do is take your best weapon away from a horse like this.
As I wrote in the closer look in Saturday's form for the 4 Thunder Snow, he's banked $16 million in his career. He's won two Dubai World Cups, 2 Group 1 races on turf, the UAE Derby, and he just seems perpetually underappreciated, probably because of the antics he threw at the start of the 2017 Kentucky Derby. This Dubai World Cup, he had to work very hard to beat Gronkowski, who would probably be a little bit of a price in this year's Met Mile, but he tries very hard. My concern is this, Matt. I think this one-turn mile is going to be a very stern test for him. They're going to go fast early while he's won at a mile and at shorter distances overseas. I'm not sure he's seen pace like this before, which means he's going to have to come from far out of it. But you've got to respect everything this horse has done on the track.
Thunder Snow is one of the more underappreciated and borderline disrespected horses we've had here in the past handful of years for what he's accomplished. And as good as he is, he's taken his game on the road. He's won on turf. He's won on dirt. Doesn't matter what the situation is. I just think Thunder Snow through and through is a good racehorse. Now, you bring up the reason I don't like here in this spot. For, well, 2 reasons. I think the distance is going to be a little bit sharp for him. You brought up the pace situation. He's not used to seeing pace like this. I think he's going to need to come from a little bit farther off of it. But also keep in mind, this is his first start since the Dubai World Cup. I think this could be nothing more than a prep race. And I know it sounds silly to say a prep in a Grade 1 Met Mile, but to me, you've heard the connection sort of map out the idea of going to Saratoga and eventually fall campaign leading into the Breeders' Cup. This, to me, feels like nothing more than a starting off point, getting him ready for those longer races.
I tend to agree. I think he is going to come with a late run. I wonder if it's too little, too late. The 6 Promises Fulfilled picked off where Metropolitan left off last year when Metropolitan went to the sidelines. They had a little case of Derby fever with Promises Fulfilled after he stole the Fountain of Youth on a speed favoring track. It was nice to see this horse bounce back during the summer with some big effort sprinting, including beating older horses in the Grade 1 Phoenix. Now, he's only had 2 races this year, and nothing went right for him in the Dubai Golden Shaheen. He was there because of his speed. And of course, Murphy's Law. He missed the break. He ended up on the chase. That's not Promises Fulfilled. He did a little better last time out in the Churchill Downs. He made the pace. It looked like he loomed for an instant at the quarter pole like he was going to run big, and then he kind of was 1 pace late. But this is his 3rd start of the form cycle, and something tells me Dale Romans has been pointing for this all along. The question, though, is can he get the mile in a fast-paced scenario?
I think he can. I've long thought that his speed, the way that he runs, he has that sort of speed that can be rationed out over 8 furlongs. I know he's run some of his better races going shorter. I've always felt he's a 7/8 one-turn miler. Now, the question is, can you go, deal with Metropolitan early on, put Metropolitan away, and then deal with the horses coming from slightly off the pace? It feels like it's a tremendous ask at this point for this horse, but I won't be surprised at all if he runs well.
Last year's Belmont Stakes card, Prince Lucky, was tough as nails. In the Easy Goer Stakes, he was in between horses, he was getting bounced around, and he still found a way to win. He was being prepped for the Curlin at Saratoga for a fall campaign. Something happened. Todd kicked him out. He said, I'll bring him back at Gulfstream, and bring him back he did. 2 super impressive one-turn mile performances. Okay, against weaker competition. His last race, the Westchester, to me is just another throwout. I don't think he likes a sloppy track. He was 4-5 wide on the backstretch. That being said, while he has figs, this is the toughest test of his career.
Yeah, no question about it. I agree with you. Draw a line through the Westchester. I just don't think he can stand up on a wet track. You get those runs 2 and 3 starts back down at Gulfstream. If he runs one of those here on Saturday, he's in this thing with a chance at a big number for big connections in here. The one thing I would say about Prince Lucky that you maybe want to factor in, I'm going to be very curious to see how he's ridden in here. From the outside, he's shown a little bit of speed in the past, and it wouldn't totally be a stunner to me if Metropolitan went, if Promises Fulfilled went, and Prince Lucky kind of parked right out there and potentially you get into a situation where you can box a horse like McKinsey in between horses down on the rail. I just look, if he can run back to that How's Hope, he's got a giant chance in here at what's going to be a very, very square number. I just don't know if he's quite this level yet.
I have a question to ask you about Pavel. Could you make the argument that he's just a little bit dirtied up? I mean, he won the Stephen Foster last year going 1 1/8. It wasn't the strongest race in the world. I believe the favorite had all sorts of heat exhaustion and was dehydrated. But after that race, he caught Accelerate, the champion older horse of 2018, and really had no chance in those races. It is very difficult with the quarantine situation to ship to Japan and run well, and he did not run well in the Champions Cup. And in his 2 races this year, he caught a sloppy track in the San Pasquale, which I don't think he liked. And last time out, adding blinkers in the Dubai World Cup, he was in the thick of things till about the 16th pole before flattening out. I wonder if this turn back with a fast pace actually works for him. And I think, given the right ride and scenario, he can get a piece.
I thought he ran quite well in the Dubai World Cup. And again, it's a little bit of an interesting placement for me because we know he won the Stephen Foster last year at Churchill, and the Stephen Foster is next week. So I kind of assumed he would end up there. This is a really, really tough race for a horse like this. I agree with you. He's better than what the page would suggest at this point because he's had a number of things go sort of awry for him. I'm not totally convinced that a mile is really in his wheelhouse. And again, boy, this field is just so salty. I think he's going to have to run the race of his life.
Longest shot on the board likely to be the 5 Tale of Silence, who won the Grade 3 Westchester in 2018 with just a picture-perfect trip, tracking a 3-ply pace battle and then shooting up the rail to win a blanket finish. He went away for a long time after that race. He couldn't deal with Prince Lucky in his last 2. Now he's coming off another little bit of a layoff. He's hard to make.
I think he's a nice horse. I think this is a really, really tough ask for him.
So many ways you can go in this year's edition of the Grade 1 Metropolitan Mile. Let's take a look at our top selections. You're going with a horse that I think can be called a horse for course. Firenze Fire has raced 3 times at Belmont. Grade 1 winner of the Champagne, 107 Beyer winner of the Dwyer at this distance, 106 Beyer winner last time out in the Run Happy. And doesn't he just have the great running style where he can track outside?
I think he works out arguably a perfect trip in here. I think you let those 2 or 3 horses go. I think this horse is able to sit out there in the clear, very similar to the way that he did. I understand he broke on top and eventually was eased out into the clear in that Run Happy. But the way that he ran that day, I mean, he was basically geared down for the final 1/8 of a mile, and he just dusted that field. Now, granted, facing much better this time around. He's another one, though, that I've always thought is better at this mile distance as opposed to those shorter ones. My concern here, and I do think the morning line might be onto something, I fear that Firenze Fire, if there is ever a wise guy horse in a race as salty as this, I fear he might be the one that ends up kind of taking the attention of a number of handicappers. If that's the case, maybe his price is a little bit unappealing. At the same time, I think you have to look at him and say he's one of the main players in this race.
4-1 on the morning line. David Aragona agrees that he might be a little bit of a wise guy horse, but he gets along so well with Arad Ortiz. He's a very underrated gate horse, as you mentioned. Yeah. He will break very well, but then he will come to hand when Irad takes him in hand, and that's likely going to happen in the Met. He's going to be sitting in a good spot ready to pounce. Let's find out how find out how good Cold Front is. Cold Front back in 2017, I loved his race in the Gallant Bob. Maybe it wasn't the greatest field in the world, but he basically won that race on 3 legs because he ended up with a fracture. He was gone for over a year. His last 3 races, I think, have been very good. Now, I know the Mr. Prospector was not a strong field, but he must have been 5 wide on the back stretch, wide all the way through the turn, and he still won in his second start off that long layoff. The Razorback, I think, was a little far for him, going 1 mile and a 16th, but he gutted that one out. And you want to talk about gutting it out. In the Godolphin Mile, he broke from the far outside post, was 4 wide on the back stretching through the turn. He was outpaced turning into the stretch, and it looked like he was going to be second best, but he really wanted it. That horse, Heavy Metal, won the Godolphin Mile in 2018, and Cold Front wore him down. After that race, Pletcher said, Met Mile. There was no discussion about it. This has been the goal all along. Timeform US thinks he can sit just off the pace. 6-1's a fair price. I want Cold Front.
Yeah, for me, this is the race where really it's one of those perfect storms where if you like this horse, you're going to get the price that you want on him because I think he might even float up from the 6-1 for the reasons that I'm a little bit unsure of with him. I just don't know how good he is actually. He might be every bit as good as some of these horses, but based on the class that he's kept and the company that he's kept, that's the only concern at this point is I'm not entirely sure if he's ready for this level. But look, from a number standpoint, he fits. from a price standpoint, he more than fits in a spot like this. You're going to get a very good number on a horse that on speed figures fits in this race. I'm going to be curious to see what Jose Ortiz does from the inside, because I can't imagine him being on the lead in this race. I'd be stunned if he was. I think you let those other speeds go, you sit the pocket with this horse, and you try to angle out turning for home.
I agree. I think that's the plan. Looks like a spread race for me in multis. I'm going 1, 4, 2, and 3, but I'm terrified of Ferenzi Fire. He's your top pick. Give me numbers.
I went 7, 2, 3, and 4, but what I said at the top, I genuinely mean it. You could make a serious argument for, I think, 7 to the 9 in here.
This race should be a war, and it should be fun to watch, and it's going to be fun to bet with your DRF Bets account, especially when you use your mobile app. 10% exacta winners bonus on every race during the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival. Learn all the details at bets.drf.com. An approximate post time for the very prestigious Metropolitan Handicap, 4:46 Eastern. Good luck.